Hello folks, yes it's me, Roy Hudd, here at home among variety and music hall. The great love of my life, but not a word to the wife. Now I'm the president of the British Music Hall Society, and this year, 2013, is our 50th anniversary. Yet the society started just as the old variety theatres were beginning to go. Although many of the old variety theatres have closed, variety acts and variety shows are becoming more popular every day. And this brings cheer to all the folk who live in Brinsworth House, home to all sorts of elderly members of the entertainment profession. It's the residential and nursing home of the Entertainment Artistes Benevolent Fund. The EABF's patron is Her Majesty the Queen. Yes, everybody loves variety. Just looking round the walls gives you the flavour of some of the great names who stayed here. So what better place for young performers Sam Ferrell and Lucy Weeks from the Mad Theatre Company in Manchester to come to learn about variety. Meeting them is a member of the Fund's Executive Committee, an honorary chaplain for Brinsworth House, Reverend Canon Roger Royal, who incidentally has himself played Dame in pantomime. Oh yes he has.
Smart proposal trick, isn't it?
So, we're going down to Brinsworth House.
Brilliant.
So, what's it like down there? Because obviously we haven't been before.
When I first got to know it, by visiting the great actress Dame Roy Hudd there. She'd been taken ill, she couldn't manage to live on her own anymore, and so she went there to live. And I regularly visited her. And one of the reasons why I liked Brinsworth so much, that when I first saw her, she was sitting on a sofa, and one of the staff came and said, Dame Thora, would your guest like some tea? And she said yes. And instead of, just plonking tea down, a tray was brought, put in front of her, then she poured, and she was in charge. So it was as though she was in her own home. I thought, this is a great place, and I could end my days there as well.
So what have we got up to now? Like, what do we do for entertainment?
The Queen's Jubilee, there was a great party, and topping the bill was Bruce Forsyth.
Oh.
Well, Bruce Forsyth's 84 or something like that, so he's as old as some of them in the home. And he sat on the chair and did a tap dance routine, and it was absolutely wonderful. And it's super that you come all this way down to see them. They like visitors, and I'm sure you'll be made very welcome.
Brinsworth House was built in 1850 and, after refurbishment by the great theatre architect Frank Matcham, it became the home for entertainers in 1911. 600 performers put up the money to buy and establish our very own retirement home. Almost every show business person you can think of has had some connection with Brinsworth, from the Vaudeville Golfing Society to the Grand Order of Water Rats, Lady Rattlings. Sam and Lucy are chatting to matron Sheila Gould a few days before she herself retired after 25 years.
All the residents here have some involvement with entertainment or are dependent of people who've been on the stage, people who were possibly backline of the chorus. So many characters and so many different characters. I mean, we've had producers, Punch and Judy, wardrobe people, DJs, television people, singers, dancers. I mean, one of our ladies up until about 2 years ago could do the splits.
Wow.
And she's still here. But I won't say who it is because I don't want to try. The spectrum is enormous, the diversity.
So what exactly was variety? Well, it grew out of the old music hall at the beginning of the last century. It really was the start of entertainment for the whole family, and variety was a great name for it because, unlike today where you see one big name for a couple of hours, a variety show presented a wide variety of different talents. In a couple of hours you could have seen 12 or 13 acts. You'd have had well-known singers and comedians, but lots of others too. Ventriloquists, acrobats, musicians, clowns, paper tearers, jugglers and magicians, to novelty dancers and footballing dogs. All sorts of original ideas displayed for just 10 or 12 minutes. The format was hugely popular. In the 1940s and 50s, Before there was a television in every home, the vast majority of folk went regularly to their local theatre. Keith Sahlberg is a retired theatrical agent and impresario. He was, and still is, one of Theatreland's great characters. Well known for his Homburg hat and wicked quick wit, he knew everyone and booked most of them into shows all over the country. So, what was an average variety show like?
I mean, an ideal bill would be you'd open with someone like Flack and Lamar, a double dance act, 10 minutes, 11 minutes. You'd put a second spot comic on as the warm-up comic, as he were, somebody like Billy Maxim, 12 minutes. Then you'd have a speciality act, which could be the Ariel Kenways. Then you'd have a strong comic, someone like Freddie Sales. And then you'd finish the first half on perhaps, someone like Ravitz and Landau. Then your second half, when they're coming back from the bar, you'd start on the front runners. Flack and Lamar would go on, 3 minutes and off, don't even wait for the applause. Then the comic who's been on before probably does a little bit more. Then you start rolling again. You've got a magical act, and then you've got the other top of the bill. You'd have, say, Elsie and Doris Waters, Hutch, people like Lee Lawrence and David Hughes, David Whitfield, you know. After the top of the bill, on would come a little juggler or a balancer on his own for 7 or 8 minutes while people got up, walked out and put their hats and coats on because they'd seen all they wanted to see. The top of the bill was always one before the end. What a world it was.
Kenny Gibbs started out as a performer on the variety circuit at the age of 14. Like so many of his contemporaries, Kenny was self-taught, and he could sing and dance as well as turning his hand to comedy and carving out his own particular niche.
Tell us about your act and what you did.
Well, basically I was a song and dance man, and I went into a Go As You Please competition in Scotland when I was 14, and I won the All Scotland finals for the tap dancing and singing. I was dreadful. I was sitting in the bus one day in Glasgow, coming into the city, the double-decker bus, and it was when the day of the conductresses, and there was this woman I was fascinated by. I got on my stop at Glasgow Green to come into Glasgow, and I couldn't take my eyes off this woman. She was a middle-aged woman with dyed tomato-rich red cut hair, high cheekbones. She looked like a drag queen. And when she took the fare, she went, thank you, sir, thank you, anybody else now? And so I suddenly thought, I can work on that. So I did a bus conductor's act, very successfully. And I used to sort of wear the costume with a beret. I used to work on my own introduction, just a big musical introduction. Da, 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 da. You say, oh, I'm Jeannie McCoon from Glasgow Town, the bus conductoress. Every day and every way I get into a mess. The drivers all adore me, the inspectors I replace. I'm Jeannie McCoon again to the bus conductor. Da-la-da, da-la-da. And I used to storm them, and Mr. Munger said to me, Roy did not make it a number one spot, which I did. I mean, I can remember that bus conductor to this day. Fares please, fares please. You could have heard on the next street. Come along now, thank you. In fact, I'll tell you, I stayed on the trip. And then suddenly when they were going off the bus, she was saying good night. She went very broad Glasgow. Good night, Santerio. Nice seeing you. God bless her.
What's the difference between a pantomime dame and a drag queen?
Oh, vast difference. Because when you're a pantomime dame, the audience know that you're a man. You must make it perfectly clear you're a man. Because it doesn't work the other way. Yeah.
What really made you want to get into that?
And there was a man called George Lacey, who was a premier dame in Scotland then. And I used to go to all the shows, and I liked the way he worked. I liked the way he delivered, and he was quite unique. And because he did his hands on all that sort of business, which was brilliant. Then I became very well known in the country as a pantomime dame. And because I could sing and tap dance at the same time. I loved Jack and the Beanstalk. For a dame, That was the premier part because she's got the cow. And she's got to sell the cow because she can't pay the rent. And her son, who was the principal boy in the panto, comes on, and there's a big nostalgia scene when she said, "Mother, we've got to get rid of Daisy." And of course that start floods of tears and drop the lights, and then the music coming in the background. Da 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 da. And she goes, then they'll drop the lights down to a pin spot between the cow and the dame. Then when they come on and take her away, and she keeps looking back and the tail wagging that. And then Daisy, as we called her. "Oh, Daisy, Daisy, please come back." Anyway, oh, and then she comes back. They'll all lived happily ever after. But that was the best dame part.
Me and Lucy, we do some like performances in different theatres around. What would your advice be to someone like us?
Stand on the side and watch everything. Watch all the act. Learn. Never miss the opportunity to watch another act. G.H. Elliot came and said one night, "Young man, why is it you're always at the side of the stage watching?" I said, "Because I'm learning." He said, "I wish a few more would do it, because you eventually find then there's something that you can take and get into your own style and expand on it." I'd love to see your character in panto. Do you have an opening number? Do you write something? I'm interviewing you now.
Well,
in this production I do. Yeah, it's a bit of a daft sort of dance to George Michael's song called "I Want Your Sex."
Oh yeah.
Oh God, Joe.
That's a good idea.
No. I'm dressed as if I'm at a school disco, so I'm like a middle-aged woman trying to be young and sexy. As I started dancing on Sunday night, my top popped open and I had tissue down my topper's boobs and it fell out on stage in front of everyone and everyone started laughing, but I just carried on and embraced it and I really enjoyed it.
A life touring variety theatres. A tough life. Looking back, rose-coloured spectacles done half out. Weekly train journeys, change of crew, and theatrical landladies. Oh, don't get me started on them. Back to agent Keith Solberg. Like so many of his vintage, he has a fantastic memory. He can tell you who opened the show at the Attercliffe Palace on Easter Monday in 1950 and how much money they lost that week. I love listening to him. I reckon he should be on the stage himself.
I didn't tell you the whole story about Worcester, which is when I was at school. I left, and my final report said, I left school when I was 16. My final report said, "I hope to hear big things of him in the theatre." 2 years later, I was back in Worcester running a theatre. I come from a very well-known theatrical family. The Solberg family, I would say, they were the most famous theatrical family in the land, outside of London. They used to do pantos here, there and everywhere, so I set up on my own, purely as a one-man business, really, with my wife, bless her, a television actress, Joyce Hempson. I used to put on variety shows and musical shows. All some were very well-known people. Little show built round Ralph Reeder, Mr. Gang Show, lovely man, called Ralph Reeder with his Stars of Tomorrow. They were young acts, established acts, it wasn't a talent contest. There was a little Russian dance company, the Balalaika Dance Company. Then I used to do a magic show round Robert Harbin. You may or may not remember, he was the origami man and the paper terror and the zigzag girl in the cabinet. And we had a Spanish dance company, Ramon Villar, and his flamenco player dance company, de Madrid. His real name was Stanley Tiller, and he was a taxi driver from Edgware. Temperance 7, that was one of my main acts. I was the agent for a play called The Tart and the Vicar's Wife, and it went nearly everywhere. I made a lot of money, actually, that play. And at any one time, I could offer you a choice, probably, of about 15 or 20 different shows. How much did I get paid? You could say how long is a piece of string or it's elastic. It depends who they are, what they are, and whether they took their own show in. I mean, Nat Mills and Bobby toured their own show. Let's get on with it. It varied from the town to the capacity of the theatre. You could say X pounds from perhaps the top of the bill for a small theatre, get 150 quid, but they get £1,000 in a big theatre in those days. The supporting acts is probably £25–30, even less sometimes. And out of that they paid their own fares, they paid their digs. 12 performances for that money. But I mean, looking back to repertory, which is a different thing, I know when I went to Lytham, we had 8 artists in the company and the salary bill was £42. In those days the equity minimum was £4.10 for actors. It's like every business, it was good for the people at the top.
Did you ever see any acts that were like random? Because you get a lot of singers and comedians. Did you get any that were unique?
What about Joe Adami? He was the man who used to dress up like a billiard table on his back, and he'd cue the ball round the top of the hat and it would go down and fall into the billiard. Joe Adami's a human billiard table. There was a freak show out called Would You Believe It? What about Henry Vadden? What about Henry? He used to have a great big steel table, and the finish of the act was he used to put on a fireman's helmet with a spike on it, and he'd throw a wheel up into the air and he'd catch the wheel on the spike of the helmet. Henry Vadden and Lady, usually last turn they were. Duncan's Collies, what about that act? Professor Sparks with his moon rocket. It was a terrible explosion and he was dressed up like a tattered old tramp, and all of a sudden he'd open his jacket, because you've got to see this, it's not funny to hear about it, and he opened his jacket and he'd got a toilet roll here and he'd tear some paper off it and he'd hand it to the musical director. He'd said, "My card." Leslie Welsh was Great Britain's leading authority on sporting facts and figures. I used to feed him from the audience, and they'd say, I'd suddenly say in the middle of that, "Mr. Welsh, can you tell me the wettest race course in England?" And he'd think for a minute and say, "Oh yes sir, I'd say Putney to Mortlake." And then I'd say, "Well, can you tell me who was the most sporting woman in the world?" I gave him the gags. So he says, "Lady Godiva." I said, "Why is that?" "Because she put everything she'd got on a horse."
Who were some of your favourite acts and what did they do?
Oh, my favourite comics, that's very easy. Max Miller used to have an outrageous dress and a straw hat, but everybody knew him. I mean, they just went mad as soon as he came on. Mary from the Dairy, and Tommy Trinder, Jimmy James, little man you've never heard of called Scott Sanders, the one who said somebody putting it around the time, Barmies with his stooges. Jimmy Wheeler, I used to, well, he was a legend. He's the one that drove off the pier when he was drunk once. I says, "Waterloo, please, driver." He says, "The station." I says, "I'm a bit bloody late for the battle, aren't I?"
Now, 2 names that many people over a certain age will remember with great affection: Pearl Carr and Teddy Johnson, a hugely popular husband and wife singing team who were top of the bill in variety for many years, and indeed were our first successful entrants in the Eurovision Song Contest.
That was you two.
Ah, yeah.
How did you both get into the entertainment business?
Well, we were in the show business from a very early age. I was, and my mother was a theatrical, and she always taught me how to dance, tap dancing, acrobatic, taught me all I know. And then I went into a troupe called the Corona Babes, and then there was another one after. What was it?
Terry's Juveniles.
That was a big children's show.
Teddy, how did you get into the entertainment business?
My father one night took me to a Sunday concert, Sunday League concerts they were called, at the local Lewisham Town Hall, and it was De Bois Summers and his orchestra, who were then one of the leading orchestras of their type in the country, one of the most popular ones. And somehow it just took over my whole life. I could tell you at one time, I think, the personnel of all the major bands in the country, even someone like Jack Hilton, who at times had 20 musicians on the stage.
How was it working with each other?
Well, we both liked the same things, you see. I mean, he liked singing, I liked singing and dancing, and we just progressed because we liked the same things, really.
Eurovision Song Contest. What was that like, being in Eurovision?
Well, it was fun, wasn't it? Because didn't know anything about it until we were actually in it.
Pearl Carr et Teddy Johnson.
Petit oiseau qui vient de Grande-Bretagne, c'est un voyage courant, Jacqueline, de la Grande-Bretagne.
It wasn't known then. This was 1959. This is only, I think, the second time that it was played in Britain. And our agent had phoned up late in 1958, about September or November, and said, would you like to go in for the Eurovision Song Contest? And can you believe, I said, what's the Eurovision Song Contest? And the contest was held in Cannes, in France.
Oh, yeah.
France mounted the competition that year because they'd won the previous year. And we went over there, we flew over to Cannes on the Sunday, and they had a duet, which we were submitted with first of all. And when we went to, when they invited us to go down and listen to the songs and choose one, when we got there, I said, well, I'm afraid most of the good songs are gone. This one's, everybody's turned this down. Nobody wants this. And they played Sing Little Birdie. And
we both said at the
as soon
same time.
as the pianist started to play it.
Didn't we say, both at the same time, we both said, that's the one, we'll do that.
We looked at it.
We'll do that one.
And right away, we both liked it.
Yeah, we both
and I could hear that I could do something with it as far as the harmonisation was concerned, and that it should work.
You wouldn't be able to sing any of it now for us, would you?
I don't know. As a matter of fact, I tried the other night, I think, in one of my dreams. But I don't know. Can you remember if I do the intro?
No, carry on. You can do the intro.
Yeah. Bum, 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 bum.
There's a bird on a branch.
There's a branch on a tree.
There's a tree in the meadow, and that's where I want to be.
Sing,
sing,
sing, sing, sing, little birdie, sing,
sing, sing it. There's a bird on a tree.
There's a branch on a tree. There's a tree in the meadow, and that's where I want to be.
I'll tell you what, I think we ought to go away and rehearse this.
Sing, 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 little birdie, sing, sing, sing it. There's a bird on a branch.
There's a branch on a tree.
There's a tree in the meadow, and that's where I long to be. Neath the bird on the branch.
Neath the branch on a tree.
Neath the tree in the meadow, where you said you loved me. Sing, little birdie, sing your song. Sing and help our love along. Sing, little birdie, up above. Sing the song of love.
Oh, it's too high for me, I'm afraid, for the harmony.
Oh, well, I'll have to get a younger man. We haven't sung it for years.
No.
Now we don't know it.
Oh,
it
really?
was lovely.
Oh. But the most memorable thing about the whole thing was we were walking down the main streets of Amsterdam 2 days after the competition. And
well, we were walking down this street, and I think it was a girl said, "You should have won. You should have won."
And the people said, "Sing a little birdie," or "Eine kleine Vogel." That was the Dutch version.
That's it.
And they were, as we were going down the street, "Eine kleine Vogel." What do you want? "Eine kleine Vogel." No, sing a little birdie. Amazing, quite amazing. Just one television, and they recognised us the next day. You know, quite amazing.
So, what did our young performers from Manchester learn? As part of this film, Dovetail arranged for Sam, Lucy and a large group of other members of the Mad Theatre Company to go to 3MT Theatre in Manchester. 3MT is an independent venue in Manchester city centre, run by two ex-variety performers, John Topliff and Gina Frost, who put together some workshops on the history of variety to give them some background. Then, Dr. Alexandra Mitchell from Salford University gave them all some training in oral history. MAD have been going for 15 years and have over 50 original plays under their belt. They run classes and groups all over Greater Manchester, as well as creating all their own work. Posh Tramps and Papooses is their latest show. They see themselves very much in the variety tradition. Good on them.
We are, let's say, the 2013 version of, you know, variety and that kind of sort of traditional British comedy, British humour. You know, it's got to be entertaining, it's got to be quick and sharp, quite a lot of song and dance, a lot of talking directly out to the audience. A lot of the men play women, a lot of the women play men, kids play adults and vice versa. The whole of the sort of entertainment sort of spectrum.
My name's Calvin and this is my old G Melvin. Alright, I'm the 1000th person in Boston to get an Asbo. Hey!
A lot of the plays that we write, they've got a message, but we always do them through humour.
Yeah.
But, you know, still with a sort of family audience kind of thing, so, you know, you can say what you want to say, but you can get away with it.
Please be in awe of its latest creation, entitled Green Man Crossing. Red.
We use a lot of young people in the plays. We never advertise that it's a young person's cast or anything like that, but you do get the sense that sometimes in the first 5 minutes of a performance, if there's young people on the stage, the audience thinks, oh God, this is a kid's play. It's not what I sort of signed up for. They think they're going to watch the kid in the school play and think it's that sort of level, but I think after sort of 5, 10, 15 minutes, they forget about that, and especially because of the big bright costumes and because we mess around with the gender roles and the ages, then it just becomes like a cartoon. And I think just because there's young people in it doesn't mean it's rubbish.
Is that you, Father? Malcolm, it's you. Oh, let me look at you. Oh, you're such a handsome boy. You have the looks of a young Charlton Heston. When he was Ben-Hur. Father, do you really think so?
We would rather just do original things that are relevant to us and relevant to the time and the audience. The sort of shame about ours is that we write very much about the here and now, so they can date quite quickly. But then it's also, well, if you're here now to watch it in 2013, it'll be great.
God, I hate places like this. We said we'd be Hector, darling, for dinner. I just went over to the DJ and I said, excuse me, lovey, do you do requests? And he looked at me through his split-rimmed glasses and his unkempt beard, as if I had two heads. I said, hey, don't look at me like I've got two heads when you're sat there wearing a flat cap looking like one half of Chaz and Bleeding Dave.
Seeing Kenneth, the pantomime Dame, it's good to see that he's worked in the same sort of thing as us.
It was quite nice because when I was talking to him about it, he got all like emotional about it in a way, because he was saying like it's a dying art, and I was telling him the sort of stuff that we do. He was dead chuffed, and he was like, oh, you must send me pictures, and like he was really interested, and he was really happy, and he said to me like, keep it alive, keep that sort of art going, because you don't see it much anymore.
It was interesting to meet all the people who had aspirations and worked at them non-stop and made huge sacrifices. People think that like people won't be interested anymore. There's lots of different changes and people don't want to know about it, but they do. It's really interesting.
It was more than just going and doing a show. It was like their entire life was all built towards it, and it was more than just turn up, do your act, go home, wake up in the morning, work at Tesco, go home, and like that. It was everything was put into it, and that's what we try and recreate.
It started off there with the music hall, and we now as a theatre company are carrying on that tradition, and while there is TV and stuff like that, there will always be theatre.
Come on!
All of us enjoy looking back to good times. Now, lots of old performers, and I'm one of them suddenly now, we look back and say how marvellous it was, but was it really? I don't know. We like to think it was marvellous. It's like talking to people in my generation, they say, the 2 years I spent doing national service, the happiest time of my life. They forget the terrible getting shouted at and having to pull up your shoes and press all your things and, oh, I don't know. But we love to look back, and I love to look back, particularly at the history of musical and variety, because I think there are elements of it that you can take from there and bring back in today. And our idea is to really, of course, remember the great stars of the past and the great events of the past in the theatre, particularly variety world, but also encouraging the talent of today. Get out there in front of an audience, any audience, and do it. Don't spend all your time in rehearsal rooms and learning it and going through courses, because there are no courses, particularly for comedy. The only way you can test if you're funny or not is to get out in front of an audience and do it. If they laugh, you're a success. If they don't laugh...
When the years pass on by and we're wed, you and I,
And the bluebirds are singing their sweet love songs in the sky,
we will dream of that bird.
And we did this broadcast on Friday or Saturday, whatever it was, and we did it with the orchestra, and they just wouldn't stop applauding. It's quite odd, quite amazing. These Dutch people, they wouldn't stop. It was unforgettable.
And would you have chosen any other jobs?
Absolutely not. I made a good living from it, made a lot of friends, was very fortunate to be part of the variety business.
It's always with some people you remember. Certainly Mrs. Cooper from the King's South Sea said that to me once. Said you always remember, so she always used to remember, she says, Nat Jackley, when he used to do the holiday camp sketch, and he'd turn up at the holiday camp and he'd do all the rubberneck business, of course, and then he'd, and not the facilities, where's the facilities? And he'd throw all his bags over the place. That was a great comic, Nat Jackley, from a famous family. Sex, that's what the rich people in Richmond have their potatoes delivered in.
I always remember Spike Milligan saying, the worst act I ever saw, he said, was called The Counting Cow, he said. Now this bloke used to come on, he said, dressed in a smock with a farmer's hat and a bit of straw sticking out of his mouth, and he used to bring this cow on, a live cow, and he'd say to the audience, right now, how old do you think my cow is? 238. Oh, don't know. 7? No. Anybody out? 1,000? No, you're wrong. How old is my cow? 12. No. She's 4. And he walked off. That was the act.